Hello and welcome to the wonderful world of unconditional colors. I'm Kelly. Welcome if you're new here. Thanks for coming back if you're coming back, especially if you're on my podcast. I know it's been absolutely ages since I've posted anything. And I've been kind of, reevaluating how I want to connect with podcasts. So yeah, and I'm also doing a YouTube video format if you are on the podcast, if you prefer a video that also exists. Everything's linked in all of the different descriptions if you're on YouTube, podcast, whatever. Yeah, okay, that's enough of that. So today we're talking about colors and the flow state. So I chose this topic as my very first ever newsletter, topic. So if you're curious about receiving these weekly newsletters, link is also in the description. But yeah, I chose this topic because I just think, there's like I've just heard this so many times from people, this idea of, but I'm not a creative person and I'm not artistic and I'm not this and I'm not that. And it's just like we are all creative. Creativity can be expressed in so many different ways. Creativity is so broad. And tapping into the flow state is really so there's this beautiful quote. Like tapping into the flow state is this sense of satisfaction that I think so many of us are looking for. So the quote goes like this. It says, flow is more than an optimal state of consciousness, one where we feel our best and perform our best. It also appears to be the only practical answer to the question, what is the meaning of life? Flow is what makes life worth living. So this is from Stephen Kotler. He has a lot of work about the flow state. Um, yeah, so I really like this perspective because I think that, when you are in those moments when you feel like, this thing's working out, but everything seems fine, but something's missing. I think the flow state is kind of like that depth, that sense of like really being one with life, really being one with whatever you're creating, whatever you're doing. Yeah, I absolutely love the flow state because, as I was painting intuitively, for several years, and I still do from time to time, I realized that the flow state is something that you flow into. Like you find your own kind of way to connect with the flow state. And I feel like everyone has like their own relationship with the flow state. And a perspective that I wanted to offer today is the idea that colors can help you to connect with the flow state on a deeper level, or, in certain spaces or certain areas of your life. So yeah, one thing I want to say is that you're not stuck. If you're feeling stuck, you're not stuck. You're not creatively blocked and you're not lacking good ideas. You're probably just not consistently tapping into the flow. And so when you see it this way, it's more of a question of like, how can you build this habit? How can you give the flow state a space in your life? How can you prioritize that? And the power of doing that actually is the fact that the more that you're in the flow state, I don't know. At least this is just like my personal experience. I really feel like when I'm in the flow state, my productivity skyrockets. I feel super good, and I feel like I work a lot more efficiently as well. So, it's not just this kind of state where it's like, ooh, like there really is a practical function of the flow state. Um, and so, yeah, like with practice and the self awareness that comes from practicing getting into the flow state, what I really want for you, and hopefully, this episode can be kind of the beginning of your exploration of flipping into the flow. Like flipping the switch into the flow state the same way that you do a light switch. So I want it to be simple and seamless and free from these false narratives of like, but what about this and what about that and all of like the stuff that your mind creates. um so yeah. And this is another quote that I wanted to share actually. So it says, as we receive we give, as we give we receive, and this fluidity triggers flow, a state in which new ideas and insights come and our creativity, intuition, and compassion grow. So this comes from a book that's about creativity, and it's by Laurie E. Smith. And I just wanted to share it because, I think a lot of times we're really, like really scared to share. Right? Like I'm doing this podcast right now. I don't have any like actual proper equipment. Like I know that the audio's not that great. My camera's not that great. But the thing is that I want to share, and so with these materials that I have, with my awareness of technology, which is not the highest, I want to share, and I realize that the more that I share, the more that I also receive. And, this flow state, this sense of fluidity with life really deepens for me as I do that. And so, yeah, just a personal story. I think it's just really easy to feel like the flow state is a special moment, like it's this moment where kind of like time stops. And actually being in the flow is linked with higher memory. So, you remember moments when you are in the flow. And I feel like sometimes we kind of think of the flow as sort of like this special one-off type of thing, when in reality it's not. It's something that you can tap into, when you feel to, when you want to, when you make space to. Um, and it's not like I don't know. So in terms of like my personal story with this, like years ago, so about 8, 9 years ago, I was really into debate. I love I just love exploring different ideas. So I would get really caught up in debate, really caught up in like analyzing and analyzing and analyzing, and sometimes I really felt very disconnected from myself and disconnected from the state of flow. Like I really just felt stuck in my head. And so that's kind of what I want to share here is like if you are feeling stuck in your head, there is a way to tap out of that. There is a way to break free of that. And, it's a practice. It's not something that it's like, oh, I did this thing one time. It's really about knowing that it's possible in the first place, knowing that it's not just like this mystical one off event, and knowing that it's something that you can create as a habit. And the more that you do it, the more that it's going to be easier to tap into it. And so, what I was saying before with intuitive painting, like when I started intuitively painting, it was hard because I was painting like abstract art. I was really used to being in my head about things. I had learned a little bit about art, so I was a little bit self-critical towards art and feeling like, ooh, I should do it this way and I should do it that way. And so the flow state's really special because like it kind of forces you to find this really beautiful balance between structure and flow, because in order to create flow you do need structure. And so the structure that you need is a challenge that meets your skill level. And that's the most basic definition of flow. So there are actually, so I went into a little bit of research about this. And the idea here is that, the underpinning of flow is this relationship between challenges and skill set. So in my case, at the beginning of trying to paint intuitively, I was not getting into the flow state at all, because the challenge didn't really meet my skill level. I wasn't used to making abstract art. It was something that I needed to kind of like get into. I needed to get into some kind of relationship with doing that. But as time progressed, as I was doing that every single day, I realized that it was just incredibly therapeutic for me, and I was realizing so many things about myself, and I felt like I was just releasing so much from my body. I felt so much lighter. And so my story with intuitive painting really does connect with the flow state, because it's like at the beginning I felt this sense of, ooh, what I'm doing is wrong. And I think that sometimes it's easy to feel that way, especially when it's something new and it's something that you kind of feel this inexplicable pull towards. And that's how I felt in that situation, for example. And yeah, so the flow state really is about this balance between challenge and skill. So like the better that you get at something, the more that you're going to rise to the occasion. And then at some point, you're going to need new challenges. And so that's also kind of what happened to me with intuitive painting, is like I got so comfortable with it. I got into such a specific flow with it that I was like, well, what if I challenge myself with dance? Like what if I can express myself in this colorful, emotional, liberating way, but through my body rather than through painting. And so that was another level of that challenge for me. And currently, I'm doing the same thing but with singing, you know? So I'm kind of like exploring different mediums to connect with the same root, which is expressing myself, you know, and of course, in anything, there will always be more challenges. So in intuitive painting, I could challenge myself more in that specific area. But for me, it was never exactly about intuitive painting. It was about expressing myself freely, you know, expressing myself in a way that didn't have any restrictions. And I know that that sounds, I know that that sounds really easy, but it's actually really not, especially if you've been, you know, brought up in a certain way. And so in my case, I had such a strong background of debate and proving my ideas and, you know, abuse in my family, like this incapacity for, you know, my emotions to be in that space. Like I wasn't safe to express myself. And so there was a lot there, you know, it really was a big challenge. And so I think it's like finding that thing that you feel called towards and chipping away little by little, you know. Because anything that you really feel called towards, there is something in that for you. But at the beginning, you probably won't get into the flow. Okay, so that was my little that was my little tangent. But yeah, so what I really want to say on this part is that there has been kind of a progression of the flow state. So something that we can look at here is that balance between challenge and skill. But sometimes that's actually not enough. And so people have built onto that model and said that there should also be clear goals for the task as the instructions for the task are clearly understood. You know, and so that's actually another thing I noticed with intuitive painting is that I didn't know what on earth I was doing at first. And so it felt more like a mystery. But as I got into my own kind of habit with it was clear on what I was doing. You know, like I knew where I was starting, what I was starting with, how I was gonna start. You know, and I think you kind of find your own language with things. And so then the third one is immediate and direct feedback about the progress that has been made. And so this is a really key one, you know, because you're able to kind of have this immediate sense of, oh, wait, I am progressing, or something is changing, something is transforming. And so, you know, in my case with painting, like I could see how my paintings were evolving, you know, and I could see how more detail was being there, and I could see how there was better composition and, you know, better mixing of different colors. And even though I wasn't necessarily trying to be an artist, through the practice of doing it, there was more of an artistic feel to the work that I was doing rather than just like random expression. You know, like I think at some point it started to kind of fit into something, you know, something that is abstract art that I didn't really know much about. You know, I just discovered it through challenging myself, through doing it. Um, yeah, so on a practical level, I would say open yourself to challenging yourself. I know a lot of times we kind of, well, this is actually something that I have a lot of years thinking about. And it's this idea of like security and stability, you know. So I grew up in the US, for example, and, you know, there was definitely this sense of like, ever since I was a kid, you need to find a way to live a comfortable life. And yeah, I mean, like, I wouldn't say comfort is bad, you know? I would just say it's bad when it's like the only thing, you know? And comfort can be super uncomfortable because at some point you're just plateauing. And that's how I felt a lot of the times is like, you know, people are like, don't be too risky and don't do this and don't do that, you know? And it's just like, yeah, I mean, I can risk it all, or I can sit and watch The Simpsons. But I mean, if I risk it all, at least like I'm growing, you know, at least I'm living the movie that I'm wanting to watch, you know. And so I think my point was saying this is that sometimes we're kind of adverse to challenge, like, ooh, I don't want that. Like, don't give me that. I want to avoid that. I want to kind of just stay in my lane, you know. And I think that that's where a lot of us lose that spark, you know, that spark for life, that spark for just curiosity, that kind of sense of being curious and full of wonder. I think we lose that because we stop challenging ourselves and we get stuck in a way of doing things. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm challenging myself right now. Like, I haven't made a podcast episode in over a year, and so I am starting to kind of get into that beautiful flow state as well because I feel like I don't know, I feel this very beautiful challenge, but it's something that I really enjoy doing. Like I really enjoy speaking and sharing ideas, and even though it's kind of disorganized, that's just how my mind works. So, if your mind works in a similar way, then hey, you're not alone. Um, so yeah, I think also like when you're procrastinating, this is at least something that I experience with myself, like I tend to procrastinate on things that I'm like the fun of it is lost. Like the fun of it for me, like when things are gamified, right? Like when there's a game, there's an objective and there's a certain strategy that you have to learn in order to win that game. And every time you play that game, you're gonna face different obstacles. And of course it depends on the game, right? But like every time you play that game, it's gonna be a different set of possibilities and things that maybe you don't expect. And that's what makes it fun and interesting. That's what captivates you about a game. And so I've noticed in myself that when I start to procrastinate, it's just because I don't feel anything towards it. Like I don't feel excited by it anymore. And I think the excitement comes in just like that little challenge. I'm not saying like, oh, you need to, if you've never worked out before, tomorrow you need to go, weight lift like 100 kilos or something. I'm just saying you want to just push the edge a little bit. And I think that that's something that's exciting. It's something that's like, ooh, this is uncharted territory. Um, so yeah, I wrote that here on this newsletter. I'm using the newsletter as like a little bit of a reference. So I wrote, when it gets lame, when it gets to feel lame, when you've played it so many times that you could win in your sleep. Yeah, and I think a lot of us kind of go on that easy mode. And I'm totally one of those people, and I think all of us have that in us in some sense. Like we tend to be creatures of comfort, and I think that that's good in certain areas of things. Um, but when it comes to like what you deeply, deeply care about, I think challenging yourself it's just that thing that's gonna make you feel like, ooh, can I do it though? And then when you pass to that next level, it's like, wait, I can do it though. And of course, there are always things to improve, but you can't improve until you start. Um, and so, yeah, another thing that I wrote here is that this actively encourages you to get out of your comfort zone. So many of us have been brought up to seek comfort and safety by stagnating, by not taking any risks. And so the idea of flow is an invitation for you to take risks that, really ask you to rise to the occasion. And risks that force you to grow, you know, rather than just taking risks for the sake of taking them. I think that's where just feel like taking risks has a bit of a bad rap, but it's like you're not like cliff diving. I mean, I'm not trying to say anything bad about cliff diving. I'm just saying like you're not cliff diving with no gear or no experience by yourself. For example. Like if you're cliff diving, you're probably going with experienced people who have gear and this and that. And so the idea isn't necessarily that risks are reckless. I think that that's something at least in the environment in which I grew up, there's this idea that, any risk is kind of reckless in a way. And so what I'm trying to offer here is that it's really not reckless at all um, to take risks that just push you a little bit out of that comfort zone. And that's really that secret space where it's like, ooh, I feel alive and I feel excited. And so my favorite part is now coming up. So how do colors apply to this? How does color therapy apply to this? So the first thing I want to say about this is that color therapy is something that you can work with through looking at color or through receiving colored light on your skin. And so I think looking at color tends to be a little bit more accessible, or surrounding yourself in colors, visualizing colors, meditating with colors. Of course, wearing colors as well, in a way you are receiving that color through the fabric and, the sun and things like that. But but yeah, I would say a very direct form of color therapy is just to focus your attention on a color and to be intentional about the colors that you put into your space. And so this is the magic of color. You are always surrounded by colors. And so you can use those colors to influence you. So if you're having trouble getting into the flow state, or if you're having trouble just like starting, you can use certain colors to help you kind of gain that momentum. And the beautiful thing is that this is something that you can experiment with. I always say that color therapy is something that is yours to create, really. It's yours to kind of play around with and see how colors affect you in different ways over time and in different periods of your life. And so an example of how you could kind of use color therapy to confront those situations that maybe you don't want to confront is an example with the color green. So if you know that the color green relaxes your eyes when you look at it, sends a signal to your body to calm your nervous system, if you know that it helps to, bring these feelings of balance and calm, and you know that you need to have a difficult conversation with someone, then you could work with green first to kind of get centered, get balanced, and, come into that conversation from a space that's receptive, rather than defensive. And so the idea of using color for this is that color is this kind of external motivator that your body has this innate response to. So this is where there's kind of nuance with color, because depending on your cultural background or certain experiences that you may have had, it's possible that your innate reaction to color is actually kind of programmed by these things. But generally speaking, there are general meanings of colors and general ways that they affect us on a physiological level and an emotional level. So yeah, here's just kind of like a little bit of an intro into how you could work with color to kind of help you to get into the flow state. So first of all, red. Red is an activating color. It really helps you to get into your body. Gets your heart rate increase, like gets your blood flowing. It's like, oh, I'm here. And so if you're trying to get into the flow state, maybe with going to the gym or getting used to some sort of physical routine, then maybe the color red could help you kind of get revved up and ready to do that. And so then the second one here is orange. So orange is mood boosting. It's the color of joy and play. And so it's a really great color to kind of get all of your ideas out of your head and put action behind them, like really kind of play around with your creativity and let yourself explore, rather than getting stuck in your head. Orange really kind of gets you into your body, also helps you to socialize, and it also boosts productivity. So it can kind of help you maintain that stamina as you're immersed in whatever you're trying to create. So if you're feeling kind of creatively blocked or disconnected from yourself, orange can be a very helpful color to work with. Or if you're just generally feeling low in energy as well, orange is incredibly energizing. Um, and so yeah, yellow. So yellow is the color of mental clarity. It improves concentration and focus. So in those moments when you're kind of feeling like blah, like nothing really makes sense. There's just kind of this cloud over your head, kind of metaphorically, right? Like let yellow be the sun. Of course, the sun actually is white light that is transmitting, but it looks yellow. Um, but despite that, since it looks yellow, kind of take that example of like let the color yellow really kind of clear the clouds away from your mind. And the power of yellow is that it's actually the most luminous color. So it's incredibly bright and it can be overstimulating as a result. But it's one of those colors that, since it's so bright, I really see it as sort of like how the sun kind of just changes your mood completely. I really see that with yellow. And that's also considered in a lot of cultures as well. Like the power of the sun and yellow representing the sun. And since it's such a bright color, it's like sometimes we can kind of feel stuck in the dark, like we box ourselves in. And so since it's so bright, it's like, whew, look at this, and it kind of brings a new perspective to things. So, if you're having trouble focusing, looking at yellow for a few minutes before you work on whatever it is may help you to improve your concentration. So as I said before, green, balancing and calming. If you're struggling to get into the flow because you're kind of stressed or scattered or, just feeling like you got so much going on, looking at the color green relaxes your eyes. And it sends a signal to your body like, hey, we're all good, calm down, and kind of, so there's this book that's called How Colors Affect You. And they kind of explain this more in depth. They say, the color green really symbolizes the sense of like, hey, there's food and water here, And so it's also been shown to increase your creativity for that reason because it's like, ooh, we see green in the distance. We're like, I want to go there. We got to go there. We have to arrive there. So we'll do whatever it takes to get there. But it's also relaxing because we know that we're going to be taken care of. Um, and so then we'll move on to blue. So blue helps to induce deep rest. It also is great for, reducing inflammation in your body. And this is just a great color when you're not really sleeping very well. So you could put blue, in your bedroom. You could get some blue bed sheets. If you're struggling to kind of relax, maybe you could wear blue, So yeah, high quality sleep, of course, is a really big piece of getting into the flow state. Um, and then indigo. So indigo is also great for inducing rest, but since it has like a tint of red, it's also activating enough to kind of encourage your mind to wander. And so when I think of indigo, I really think of sort of like the night sky, like this kind of dreamy, imaginative, like anything's possible kind of spirit, And so this color, since it is relaxing, it helps you to kind of go within. But since it's got that little bit of red, it's also like, hey, stay awake though, like it's kind of lucid. Um, and then lastly, purple. So there's this book that talks about how purple has been observed to help people remember their dreams. That might be a cool experiment to try out. But beyond that, purple is a color that invites you to tune into subtlety, So since it's like the lightest vibration, it can be also difficult to see, like red is very, very easy for us to see, but purple can be expressed in more subtle ways. And so that's kind of like the symbol of purple, it's like how can you bring awareness to certain details? What kinds of things are you not maybe paying attention to that could help you change your habits and get into the flow state more easily? So these are just some possibilities, experiment with them, see what works for you. I'm super curious to know, so please send me an email if you do experiment with this, um, or drop a comment. But yeah, I think that's really the power of color therapy is to, I mean, I really see colors as a language, So I studied languages. I love learning languages. It's been a big part of my life. And I've noticed that when I venture out to speak other languages, I find new parts of myself. Like there are just certain codes within a language that force you to, become aware of that your native language might not have. And so I think color is very similar in the sense of language because it forces you to kind of interact with energy and with your feelings in a way that maybe you're not used to, in a way that is more abstract, it's not so defined. And the power of color, as I said before, is that it has this immediate effect on your body and your feelings, So that's what I always say, colors bring us straight to the feeling. Um, so yeah, to kind of put this all into practice, create a specific challenge for yourself that really kind of put your skills to the test. And then choose a color that you feel like relates to that challenge. And then, you can visualize or look at that color for 5 or 10 minutes before you do that task. and then see what happens, you know? Like, let yourself kind of explore your feelings, explore what comes up when you connect with color. Um, because color is just really this world. I really think it's just kind of uncharted territory in a lot of ways. There is a lot of information about color therapy, but it's not incredibly extensive. And I think that in the coming years, there will be more information about it. And so to have these explorations with yourself, I just think is incredibly fascinating because you're sort of just like charting uncharted territory in a way, and you're able to look at yourself and your feelings and your patterns from a perspective that's very based in your feelings, that's very based in your body. Um, so yeah, that's that for today. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, actually, no, there was another thing I wanted to add. One second. So the more that you experiment with these ideas, colors, the flow state, different habits that you can create, I really recommend checking out, oh man, my pronunciation is going to be terrible, the Tao Te Ching, because this really kind of talks about the flow state as a philosophical way of living your life. And of course, it doesn't say the flow state, but it kind of really is the way of the Tao, to move from a space of gentleness rather than trying to force things. Um, and yeah, and embracing that state of consciousness that you experience, like that deep sense of presence that you experience when you're in the flow state, as something that's not just like this one off special thing, but an approach to life in the way of you aligning to your own nature. And that's really the beauty of this. And the Tao specifically talks a lot about water and the concept of a river. So it's like if you want to, like, you're never going to win by swimming upstream. Like you can swim upstream for a short period of time, but at some point you're going to get tired and the river's going to carry you. So you might as well let yourself flow with the river and find those ways in your life. Like, how are you fighting things? What are you fighting? And what is this fight that you're holding on to? I've observed this a lot, this idea that we have to fight for things. And it's just such a weird concept, because if you think of plants or if you go and wander out into nature, of course, yeah, there is like this adaptation, there is a certain fight happening to a certain extent. But generally, if you think about the forest, for example, there is a sense of harmony, and there's also a harmony in death. Not everyone's going to survive, and that's okay. Like there's this sense of like cycles, there's a sense of acceptance of the cycles. And of course, I can't say that the forest thinks like we do, but there's a lot in common. There's a lot that's interesting about that, and that's something that I'm going to be talking about in a few episodes. But but yeah, the idea here is really that when we try to fight things, we're really not going to win. And when we try to fight for things, I think a lot of times it does really come from this ego of like, but I fought and I made it. And I think with the flow state, it's like, yeah, challenge yourself, take a risk, but you don't have to fight either. Like let your skills grow like plants, and plants grow in adverse conditions sometimes. So maybe the weather gets really cold and the plant learns to adapt. Like instead of fighting, you're adapting. And I think that that's a really beautiful perspective to take away from this is like you're always going to find a way to adapt, and you'll probably adapt a lot faster if you stop trying to fight. So yeah, thank you for being here. Thanks for listening to my messy thoughts. I hope that it was beneficial for you. I hope that it was useful. The next episode is going to be about thinking in color. So, visual thinking, abstract thinking, things like that. So, yeah, as I said before, if you want to get in touch, all the links are in the description. I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear about your little scientific findings. Um, yeah, and keep flowing. trust in yourself, trust in your capacity to adapt to whatever life throws at you. And that requires patience, you know. Um, but you don't have to fight all the time. You didn't come here to always fight. You came here to create and innovate and adapt. So, yeah, have a very color flow. Try to say like color and colorful and flow. Yeah, have a colorful and flowing week, and I will see you at the next episode. Thank you so much for being here.